The film industry has existed for a little over 100 years, and it's only ever had a single goal, which was to make money. Not to entertain you, but to make money and a lot of it. There is a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding about the world of Hollywood and celebrity. It's understandable because you know it's a world full of lies, manipulation, and deception. But the problem is, there's not a lot of accurate information about how they are lying, manipulating, and deceiving you. There's a lot of conjecture and conspiracy theories, but I get it. It's hard to follow and keep track of all the lies, manipulation, and deception while trying to connect the thread, especially if you haven't studied or worked in the entertainment industry. Because I have, let me burst Hollywood's bubble for you. The founding fathers of Hollywood built an industry selling a fantasy to the poor and working class, who were prisoners of the elites. By exploiting their deepest desires to be free from poverty and live life to its fullest, they were able to make that very fantasy a reality for themselves at their expense. This fantasy is what we consider the American dream today. The American dream has never been fixed and has evolved with time, but it was always rooted in freedom. For the Pilgrims, it was religious freedom. For the Founding Fathers, it was independence from the British Empire. For the 49ers, it was going out west and striking gold. And when you compare them to Hollywood's iteration of the American dream, it's as if the roots were torn out and replaced with the very system they were all trying to escape. Because for the Jewish immigrants who founded Hollywood, it was working their way out of poverty and becoming wealthy enough to become accepted into American high society. They took their romanticized dream of the old world, a place made up of royal dynasties, nobility, and strict social classes they historically benefited from, packaged it up in Hollywood, and sold it to the poor and working class in the New World, a place they did not understand. To them, America revolved around high society. What they looked like, what they wore, how they carried themselves, what they did, what they didn't do, how they lived, where they lived. And then they would take all of it and make it accessible to the poor and working class in partnership with the elites themselves, who would profit from it through consumerism. America quickly fell into a transient dream that made them forget about the exploitation forced on them by corporate and black market elites. The economic recessions and depressions caused by banking elites, and the wars instigated and started by noble and political elites. People were no longer active members of society fighting for their human rights and sovereignty, but propagandized slaves serving the elite's interests, hoping one day they could become them. And because these immigrants desperately wanted membership into their club, they allowed these very elites to infiltrate their industry and take something so sacred and weaponize it for their own gain. The founding fathers of Hollywood are the embodiment of rags to riches, which is why this story is so established in Hollywood and why everybody, no matter where they are in the world, knows what it is no matter what form it comes in. Picking yourself up from your bootstraps, meritocracy, girl boss, hustle culture. It was all propagated by them, because if it was possible for them, it's possible for you. At least that's what they want you to believe. When they came to America, the founding fathers, like all immigrants, were shut out of opportunities and were limited to the servant industry. Because for established Americans, or WASPs, as they call them, believed it was beneath them. Entertainment was and still is part of the servant industry, which is why early on they would not touch or go near it. So if you were ever wondering why run Hollywood, it's not because of a conspiracy. It was a hustle and pathway out of poverty, though it doesn't excuse how Zionists would later weaponize their power to promote their agenda. But back to the program. The founding fathers saw an opportunity in film, left their former trades, and invested in theaters and film rights. It was only after they established themselves and made enough money they moved to Hollywood and began making films of their own. Owning theaters and building distribution networks early on allowed them to quickly scale horizontally and later vertically to turn it into a profitable industry. The films they made revolved entirely around them because they called the shots, from what it was about, who would be in it, and whether or not it would actually be made or seen by anybody. Stars would be built from nothing and propped up into the spotlight to further slip Americans deeper into the street. Because if they could pick up anybody from the street and make them so rich and so famous, even the elites want access to them, Hollywood could do it for you. All of it would be shaped by their success in Hollywood, and it was their success in Hollywood that would reshape the American dream. A dream making us all believe if you work really hard, you can become a rich and powerful elite dominating corporate America or the black market. The choice was yours, but just know it never came with any warranties. Sure, they worked hard and were able to run their studios like kings and live like elites, but it wasn't their hard work that got them there. It helped them along their journey, but the fact is success is guarded by gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers are the elites who inherit their power and don't like to share it with anybody, not even their flesh and blood. What they don't tell you about their come up is that without the permission of the black market elites like the Jewish mob who controlled the places their theaters operated in, and corporate elites like Thomas Edison who owned the patents to all of the equipment they depended on, they would have never accomplished any of it, which makes you wonder, who does this dream benefit? Now, I'm not saying there is a conspiracy, because there's not, but there was an image they needed to put out to the world and protect, which is they were self-made. When you're self-made, you are pure enough to be accepted by high society, but still tough enough to be respected by the criminal underworld. Because even if they do flock together, they still have to pretend as if they don't. Their self-made origins allowed them to float in and out of these places and benefit from their resources, knowing they would never fully gain entry. It's what we like to call sellouts, because that's what they did and that's what they do. With their success, the founding fathers of Hollywood sold out the poor and working class by allowing themselves to be infiltrated by all of the elites around the world. Corporate elites would borrow their beloved stars to shill their products. Political and noble elites would use their stars in films to reinforce their power and push their agenda on the world stage. Banking elites would buy major stakes, becoming shareholders and board members in exchange for legitimacy and funds to grow and expand their industry. Black market elites would control and enhance their image through film, extort their employees' unions, and launder money through their companies. The most damning effect that it had was that it manipulated the poor and working class to work harder for the elites, making them believe they could truly work their way up to the top on hard work alone, which is BS. What captures this concept perfectly is this specific scene from The Dark Knight, where the Joker forces Gamble's men, who were brothers in arms, to fight for a spot on his team, as he calls it. So they have to kill each other for it, or they all lose their lives. This is how the elites rule over the poor and working class. They make the poor and working class fight amongst themselves, competing for a spot they control, because they can't function without them. Their entire hierarchy depends on others doing the really hard, dirty work for them, while their hands stay clean. Hollywood is built on calculated risk. In other words, high risk equals high reward. And because it paid off for them, they sold you a story that it would pay off for you. At least that's what they want you to believe. To them, building Hollywood was a gamble they were willing to take. Film had just been invented, and Americans saw it as a novelty. But they didn't. The founding fathers of Hollywood who came from Europe knew its possibilities, because the Europeans were the only ones experimenting with it. When they made their investment, it was already an accessible and lucrative market. It wasn't an established industry yet, and nobody knew whether it would be sustainable. So not many people gravitated towards it. Many saw it as a get-rich-quick scheme, and so did they, which is why they jumped at it. Startup costs were low. All they needed was a place to rent, plenty of chairs, and a projector to display films. That was about it. Costs were cut by relying on family and only employing people they needed, making an already low-risk business less risky. The poor and working class who were desperately looking for entertainment they could afford gave them their nickels, and their nickels quickly added up, allowing them to make a return on their investment and be profitable in less than a month. With the permission of the criminal underworld, they were able to use their profits to expand, taking up market share until they can make their next power play. Calculated, but not calculated risk. When the time came to make their own films, they sought out the banking elites who came aboard when they finally saw the viability of their industry. It's at this moment the founders sold out and split up their studios amongst the banking and black market elites, where they would move to Hollywood to manage the production of films, while the banking and black market elites controlled the money in New York. It was the elites' money that built Hollywood and propped up their studios and position in America. Again, calculated, but not calculated risk. Cohen was a major stockholder of Columbia, as Zucker was of Paramount, Lammel of Universal, Mayer of MGM, Warner Brothers of Warner Brothers. But all were ultimately accountable to a board of directors in the East. The board held the real power. They could remove any of them at any time. The founding fathers got to make the creative decisions, who to cast, what films to make, how to run the lots, but only because the board allowed it. The moment the finances went wrong, New York could walk in, take over, and kick them out. So the fantasy of risking it all and winning wasn't real, because the house, or should I say the elites, always win. After all, they made up the rules. The Nickelodeons provided them with whatever they could want and need with little to no risk, but it wasn't enough. They wanted a membership card into high society and were willing to risk their freedom to get it. Calculated? No. Stupid? Yes. So if they consider debt servitude a win, then I guess it's a win, and they somehow convinced the poor and working class that it's also a win. Not only did they become debt slaves, their star system was built on debt servitude, where studios would bankroll a star's lifestyle in exchange for ownership over their life. Yet they would propagate this fantasy that stardom was a calculated risk worth taking that would result in a worthwhile reward. Which again, who does this narrative benefit? Ding, 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 ding. If you said elites, you're correct. Hollywood needed stars to be profitable, and Hollywood needed to stay profitable so its founders wouldn't lose their access and get booted, because the banking elites always need money. Since they don't make money, they'd steal it from the poor and working class, who exchanged their labor to produce goods or provide services for money. Instead of keeping their promise and protecting their money, the banking elites would loan it out to other elites, knowing there was a possibility they could never get it back. This is what led to recession after recession, the creation of the Federal Reserve, the Great Depression, and the heavy investment in Hollywood to make people forget all about it while pushing them towards the black market to help numb their pain. Did they calculate any of this? No. But it was a risk they were willing to take to have access to the elites and the life they could offer them, whether or not those rewards were worth it or not. I leave it to you to decide.
The founding fathers of Hollywood were not American. They were Jewish European immigrants who had to operate outside of American society.
Whose fault was this? Ding, 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 ding! If you said elites, you are correct again. Much like today, immigration was weaponized against the poor and working class in America because their labor became expensive. Corporate elites didn't want to pay them, so they imported immigrants to take their jobs, leaving Americans unemployed. Per usual, elites are to blame, but they always manage to successfully divert the hostilities away from them and place them on the immigrants who just don't know any better. By the way, I'm not saying any of this is right. It's all unfair. Elites treat immigrants like slaves, and citizens unleash their prejudice and cast them out from their society. So they have no choice but to build their own. It wasn't until they successfully scaled the film industry and made themselves useful that the founding fathers in Hollywood were welcomed in by the elites and knighted as American heroes. At least that's what they want you to believe. World War I and II were deeply unpopular, and there was no American support to join or involve themselves in the war happening in Europe, started by the noble and political elites. However, they didn't have much of a choice.
The banking elites drove the country and the world into a depression, and war,
according to their calculations,
was the only pathway out of it. The political elites who are beholden to the banking and corporate elites had no choice but to comply and find a way to convince the masses to join the war. So they all turned to Hollywood to make war an inevitable reality.
The founding fathers didn't need much convincing because despite their patriotism and desire to be accepted into American high society, their loyalty was to Europe, the European countries they came from, and whatever European noble or political faction they sided with, which had nothing to do with America and the American people.
Hollywood quickly rallied behind the war effort by creating patriotic films, distributing war propaganda, promoting recruitment to join the army, and selling war bonds to help pay for the war the elites started.
To further fuel their agenda, the elites in Washington legitimized them to the American people by propping them up as patriots serving their country, which they basked in. The end result was that it worked really effectively. The beginning of World War I allowed the establishment in Washington to successfully infiltrate Hollywood, using them to promote whatever policies and agendas the elites want, whether it's the bankers, corporate overlords, nobility, doesn't really matter. What they want, Hollywood pushes, and in return, they get access. Quid pro quo, as they say.
Hollywood helped lull Americans into the fantasy of American heroism, where no matter what the circumstance or situation is, America is the hero and is there to save the day.
You couldn't dare question it, and it set the elites free to behave as tyrants as they hid behind the illusion of this fantasy. The elites could pillage and plunder, kill, destabilize countries, traffic, whatever they wanted under the American flag, because Hollywood exploited the immorality of the American people and used it against them while also shielded them from the horrors of the atrocities committed under the banner of their flag. There are people still reconciling this reality because they don't want to believe it. Again, the founders of Hollywood sold out the poor and working class for their own gain, and it cost some of them their lives and the lives of their loved ones, whether it be family or friends. It cost some of them their peace and swapped them with nightmares, pushing them deeper into the fantasies they created to help them disassociate from them. It destroyed their livelihoods and any stability they had, because from World War I onward, America would never know peace and would remain at war with the world. For the founders, it was never actually about becoming American, because what they did was deeply un-American. It was about acceptance, and acceptance isn't the same as allegiance, and their allegiance already belonged to the elites. After selling out, you shouldn't be surprised that it was all in vain. They would churn out story after story, star after star, pumping these fantasies because they believed it was real. Except they knew it wasn't, but they still kept believing anyway. You can't become an elite. You are born an elite, and no matter how hard they try to run, bury their past, and alter their success story, it didn't change who they were born, what they were born, and where they were born. If they could make it out, so could you. That you could be the exception in a system designed to work for some, not all. A system built by the elites that only benefits the elites. A system that rewards the worst people in the world and punishes the best people in the world. A system that enriches people who do the least amount of work and impoverishes people who do the most amount of work. A system where exploitation is the only pathway to success because elitism cannot survive in a fair, just, and humane society. The elites don't want equality. They want supremacy. People were waking up from it, and Hollywood lulled them back to sleep, and every time the people woke up again, Hollywood would play the Sandman and lull them back to sleep again and again and again. Although their American dream has been modified to keep up with the times, it's still fundamentally the same. And so is the un-American system they keep telling you you can succeed in. Even though they fell victim to the fantasy they created, doesn't mean that you should. The moment they were no longer useful, the same elites that propped them up disposed of them and replaced them with whomever they saw fit. Fox lost his empire after he went heavily into debt to buy MGM. Right before a car crash in 1929 left him hospitalized. An antitrust lawsuit blocked the sale, and Black Tuesday destroyed his finances, forcing his bankers to oust him in 1930. Zukor lost control when the Wall Street banks that financed his empire forced him into bankruptcy in 1933. He was banished to Hollywood and kept as a figurehead for over 40 years with no real power. Lamel's son, Carl Jr., ran Universal into the ground, and creditors executed a hostile takeover in 1936 and threw both of them out. Jack Warner convinced his brothers to sell their shares as a family, only to buy them out from underneath them, taking control of the company and shutting them out. His brothers were devastated, and Jack would sell off the company in 1967. Mayer was fired by his own board in 1951. He died bitter, marginalized, and largely forgotten by the industry he built. Even though Lowe would die of a heart attack at its peak in 1927, his empire would be broken up after a US Supreme Court ruling forced MGM to sell off Lowe's theater chain. Cohen died still running Columbia Pictures and was able to do so because of his mob ties that protected him from Wall Street. It was sold to Coca-Cola Company after his death. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch and enjoy films or telling you to only live in reality. There is nothing wrong with escaping, but where you escape to matters because you never know who controls that alternate reality.
Bring me a dream. Please turn on